And welcome to This Week in Metropolis. I'm James.
And I'm Matt. Well, on this episode, it is a big deal that we have Chris from Off My Shelves, who is a regular contributor to the show in the comments, but now you can see him and hear him at the same time, which is awesome. Can't wait to speak to him.
Yeah, looking forward to that. And we've got a new question mark. We've got a few different stories to talk about. So it's going to be a packed episode. Get your comments in when you can. And we'll try and answer them questions that come at us or opinions. Also, you know where to find us. We're on all the social medias. We're on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, you know that already. We're also on Facebook Live tonight. Get following us, get subscribing, and all that jazz. But now it's time for a special comic book themed intro. Look at that. Look at that. That was specially for you, Chris.
I am amazed.
We've been waiting for the right moment. I think tonight is the right moment for that.
I agree.
Gem.
I agree. I was telling you guys beforehand that I deserve a big intro, and that definitely lived up to it.
That's it.
Well, first of all, Chris, thank you so much for joining us. And as we've said, as Matt said in the intro, you know, you've contributed to our shows previously in the comment section, getting involved. You're always one of our keen viewers, which we love. We met obviously on the Dawn of Comics quiz, which, you know, if you haven't checked them out, check them out because Chris is one of the funniest contestants on there. And I'm not just saying that because he's on our show.
Thank you. Yeah, hopefully I get to do another one soon because the last couple of ones I haven't been free for various reasons and life gets in the way. But yeah, no, and thank you for
wasn't
asking
winning,
me.
Chris.
No, I kind of like losing, to be honest, because the pressure of winning and then keeping winning is too much. I know Adam was breaking down with the pressure of being the winner every week, you know, and so I'm glad. I prefer to middle. Middle is fine.
Yeah. I'm quite happy with that. I mean, that's somehow miraculous if me or Matt get to middle. But you done pretty well last time, Matt, didn't you?
It's never going to happen. I think I did. I did better than my very low estimations, and that's all I'm happy about. If I'm honest, you know, as long as I'm not on zero and I get a little bit of a few points.
Yeah, and we tried to bring someone into it. We brought our main contributor to the show, Mark into the show, because he is intelligent when it comes to his stuff, and he's really let me down. I was really hoping he was going to come in and, like, you know, show people up, but it wasn't to be.
Well, he turned up wearing his t-shirt backwards.
I know, exactly. Mocked our t-shirts, mocked our merch.
But we gifted him.
Exactly. Didn't even pay for it.
Unbelievable. We have got a question mark coming up, as we mentioned. Look forward to that. We have got people in the chat already, so thank you for everyone who's joined us. Phil from Phil's Nerdiverse. Sorry, I was just going to say he was here at 6:27.
That's dedication. That's what you want to see, isn't it? I think the most interesting comment, though, that has been raised, James, which I agree with, I didn't notice this beforehand, is how blue do your eyes look? And I'm not flirting.
Yeah,
they do. You've got some sort of.
What's happening?
Yeah, he's got his new lenses in, I think, haven't you?
Yeah. I mean, and we all know that's not true, Matt.
Maybe it's the blue in the background.
Maybe it is reflecting back.
Don't give away the secrets.
Yeah.
And I brought a halo with me as well. So
you have.
You've got a bit of one of them as well, Chris. So
yeah, but I got to move.
To your head.
I've just got the light shining off my bald head.
Which is probably why my eyes are popping. So
obviously,
thanks for that. We've got Scott Shelf here as well. He's here. Another shelf.
Another Welsh shelf.
Another Welsh shelf. Exactly. Exactly. And well, the voice that is the question mark theme tune, Ryan, he's here. Enjoying the Mark slander. Didn't get the beginning, but still love it. Typical Ryan. Probably just wasn't listening. Anyway, enough about that.
Enough about
Let's
us.
get into the show. Let's talk
Yeah.
about you, Chris,
Yeah,
because
let's talk about you.
your show,
Nervous.
it's off his shelf. It's off Chris's shelf. It's off my shelf. I mean, it's such a good show. And how quickly in a year it's been? About a year,
Yeah,
just over?
24th of November. It was a year. So just
Yeah.
now it's a year and a month. So 13 months
Yeah,
or
yeah,
so.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the following that you've grown in such a short period of time. I mean, we're just envious. It's incredible.
Mm, fantastic.
I
But
honestly,
deserved.
yeah, well, this is the weirdest thing is like for the first couple of months, like I said when me and Phil were chatting not so long ago, is that there were just like 1 and 2 subscribers for months and months on end. And then all of a sudden just people started coming in. And yeah, it's great. It's nice to know that you're making something for other people to watch. Like, but ultimately I'm still quite selfish. I do it all for myself, really.
What was the reason you started then? What was your motivation to put this out there?
Motivation was like for years and years, I was basically a dad and with young children, and I was buying books, but then I was selling books to buy more books because you have that severe guilt when you're a dad, particularly of newborn children, that you're spending too much on yourself and you're giving too much time for yourself, so you have to keep giving things away. And so I just couldn't have like shelves upon shelves of books because I didn't have the space, I didn't have the finances. So I just had a couple of shelves of comics that I was just like, every couple of months I would sell off a few and then buy a few and sell off a few and buy a few, but I never really had a chance to amass a collection of books. And then in about 2017, I split up with my wife, and then basically I was in between houses all over the place. And so again, I didn't have a chance to really go into getting the library or collection that I wanted. And eventually then when I kind of bought a new home in about early 2019 or thereabouts, I was finally like, I moved in with the books that I had taken from all these different houses with me, which was like a bookshelf or half a bookshelf full of books, like depending on the bookshelf, obviously. And then I thought, right, well, now I'm at a point where I can just chill out and actually invest. And my kids were a bit older and they had clothes and food and they were still breathing. So I decided that I could spend money on myself.
You.
It's astounding the guilt you have as a parent for spending money on yourself. It's ridiculous. But yeah,
But
and
what
so
you should do if you buy a book, as long as you're reading it to them, it's technically for them. That's you know.
And I
Their
do. I
future.
read a lot of them to them,
go.
but then a lot of them have like a very graphic violence or sex, and so like about 95% of the books on my shelf I can't read to them, so it's difficult. But yeah, and then during lockdown, one of the things that I liked doing was watching YouTube channels, and I was watching them, I think, sort of differently to other people because I weren't watching them to find out what I want to read. I was watching them to find out what version of the book is decent because I bought so many different books over the years that the glue has come loose, so this has happened or that's happened, and I wanted to try and get the best version of a particular book that I was after. And so I just watched loads of them, and then I had shelves full, and I thought, oh, I should do that for other people. And so that's how it started, really. I started in late 2020, just thinking that this would be helpful for other people to get, and it'd be a nice thing to do myself. But it turned out to be something that helped me more than anything, because I go through lots of let's just say, without getting too deep, I got a nice little variety of mental health issues, floating around, and having something to focus on, which is why I took up drawing during lockdown as well. Having something to really focus on, like making videos or like drawing or that type of thing, was like just an extra tool in your arsenal to use when you're feeling a bit crappy, to just do that. But I approached it like a job, which helped me as well, which is why you say about it looking, good. It's because I thought, right, I'll do this. I'll do B-roll. I'll do this. I'll try to get as best as I can. And that's basically where we are now. So essentially I did it for my own mental well-being, disguised as me helping the community.
But it's, I mean, we've said this before, again, certainly during lockdown and things like that. I mean, we started the podcast way prior to the pandemic, and then kind of had a bit of a step back from it. And then, if anything, the pandemic was what made us go, let's give this another crack, sort of thing. We can get back on
We
this.
need to do something that's
We
gonna.
needed a creative spark.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the same as me, honestly. Like, I tried so hard to kind of focus because I was working from home as well, and I was doing all my jobs from my home, and I haven't got the luxury of like a separate room, like an office room. Everything's in the one place, so I felt like I was constantly in work. So I tried to then do other little projects that kept me busy in this space, really. And and drawing and making videos and reading were the three things that I did, and honestly saved me. It really did, like, genuinely.
Yeah. Well, I said this to Matt, and I'm sure I mentioned it on one of the more recent shows, that and your videos in particular are the ones that highlighted to me. But probably you and what's Pete's channel?
Triple G.
Yeah, Triple G. I'd say, and that's no offense to the others, because you're all awesome. Particularly, Phil's and Shane's. Phil's and Shane's and Scott's. But just going into like details, like even about the spine of the book and the makeup of it. It's me personally, not being a collector, I would think I would want that comic to read the story, and I'm sure you do. But there's just a whole nother layer to it as well, like with the type of the makeup of it and things like that, and it just fascinates me.
Yeah, genuinely, and that will always remain like a stable part of all my videos, because that's the thing that, like, in my head, all I would do was show you the spine and the binding and this and that, because they're expensive things, for an omnibus or something. You pay like about 50 or 60 quid for it. And it's hard to do when you haven't got much money and you want to see what it looks like, and you can look at pictures online. But then when someone shows you and points things out, it does help a lot. And it just happened by chance more than anything that I started talking about them as well. But ultimately, all I wanted to do was show that element of it, because people often say that I do reviews, but I see it more as like an overview, because I think a review is a bit different than what I do.
Going into the story and things like that.
Yeah, and it's a bit more critical in some ways and a bit more opinionated. When I kind of don't tend to get too opinionated. I just kind of give an overview, really.
Yeah. Well, one thing I loved.
Go on.
Yeah, one thing I loved watching, and we spoke about this briefly, the hip hop book that James got for me, which I put. What's it called? It's the History of Hip Hop.
History of Hip Hop, Volume 1.
History of Hip Hop, isn't it? Yeah. No,
it's Hip Hop Family Tree.
That's
Hip Hop Family Tree, and my mind went completely blank when I started talking. Then, watching your review of it, or not review, your overview of that. What struck me, which I found really cool, was watching it. Exactly what I was thinking when I read the thing you were saying, because I got to the back of the book and like throughout it mentions all these different tunes, and I was thinking to myself as I was reading it, oh, brilliant! I have to make a note of these so that I can create a playlist. And then I got to the back of it, and they were all listed there, and I thought, amazing! I'm going to create a playlist for that. And then watching your video, you say, oh, it's brilliant, because this is all. I've created a playlist of all of those tunes. Like, yes, that's exactly.
And I did, and it was an epic playlist. Honestly, Hip Hop Family Tree is so good. It's ridiculously good, and it does. And it's just clearly made by a person who loves that music, and he just adores it and idolizes it and just goes in depth into all of it. And it shows. And I love it when people go to that level of detail, like creating a playlist for the songs you're talking about. It seems like a natural thing, but no one's done it before, as far as I know. And him doing it, Ed Pisco, stroke a genius. I love that.
And as well, I found like the sharing element of it. Like you could look at that body of work and think, wow, he's really knowledgeable. Like, clearly he's, which he probably is. I'm not saying it isn't. But in the back, you've got like the reference material in terms of, books and things like that yeah, it's like, well, you've read this, so you're probably gonna like all this as well. You know, check that out. It's awesome.
It's got
really
a bibliography as well, which and again,
yeah,
you don't get many comics, whether they're fictional or non-fictional, that give you a bibliography of what's inspired that source material or anything like that. And it's designed for people to have as part of a whole experience, which is what hip hop was anyway. Hip hop was a proper cultural movement, which people forget.
Exactly.
They just think of it as the music, but it wasn't. It was art, fashion, everything. And that book really sits within that well, because it brings people into other things, like the music, like the books, like the films. And it's great. I could talk forever about hip hop.
So could I. Yeah, it's
next week's show.
James won't make
I'm having
it
a week
next
off.
week's show.
Well, we've just had a comment come through here from Shane at Dilda Comics. Chris showed me how to open a book without cracking the spine. I didn't even know they could be damaged on a hardback. He saved a couple of mine from splitting. Well, there you go. Look, saving people,
saving lives.
How do you
saving
do that,
lives
then?
of books.
So that we can spread the love. How do you open a book without damaging the spine?
It depends on the size of the book. It depends on the size of the book. But if you've got like a big, hefty book, essentially you open the two sides with the middle. Let me get a book and show you. It's easier, isn't it?
For the listeners who are not watching the show, Chris is currently walking to his bookshelf. He's now coming back.
And has come back with a very large book.
Now got a large book.
It's not that large a book. It's not that large a book. So yeah. So let's.
He's brought back the Bible.
So open like that on both sides, and then you just literally just flip it out on both sides like that.
So it keeps the spine completely flat, I'm guessing.
And what you're doing is you basically stretching out the spine. And what you want in a hardback is that to happen, really. The problem is if you just do that without stretching the spine now and again, because it really depends on how well it's made and how long it's been in storage before it got to you, to be honest, and what conditions. Because sometimes the glue can dry out and crack if you don't stretch it out and give it a bit of a if you want to put it like that.
Amazing.
Nice.
Do you, with your books, is that an important part of it, keeping them pristine and, in as good a condition as possible?
Not for me. I naturally keep them in good condition, but I'm not like, some people go to incredible lengths and more power to you, but keeping their books. Like some people, for example, they got like with the heavier books, they'll build, see this, I'll try and show you, where this text block ends, the hardback is still going on. So when it sits on the shelf, the hardback is sitting on the shelf and the text block isn't. So what happens is the text block then over time sags downwards. And so to prevent text block sagging, people create like little wooden shelves to sit in here to hold the text block up. Now, I can't be asked to go to that length. What I buy books to read more than anything. I definitely haven't bought a book ever with an investment or resale in mind or speculation in mind. And people do, all power to you, but I don't. So I just kind of crack on, really.
I do think that's the one thing that makes me a bit sad about the sort of the culture of just sci-fi and comic books or like geek culture as it's referred to, is so much of it now is like forced commerce in terms of, we've only made 100 of these and we're only going to sell them through this shop, so it's going to be worth loads of money. And well, I just want to just enjoy the product and enjoy the content rather than anything else as such.
It is weird. Well, I've talked about this to a lot of people, and it is everyone's got their own opinion and their own kind of way through it. But ultimately, there's such a gigantic market now for comic book selling. Like collected editions, weirdly, what I collect more than anything is trade paperbacks or hardbacks, which are considered collected editions. And then there's not a great deal of profit in them.
Yeah.
You might be lucky to like double the retail price if you're lucky, if you've got a rare book or something. But the money comic book wise is far more in, single issues and key issues. And that's why, slabbing them is so big at the moment, like people putting them in slabs, and that breaks my little heart. That does.
Is that the plastic cases that they have them in? Yeah.
I can understand that people want to make an investment, want to keep it pristine, but there's something just not.
It's still a book, though, isn't it?
Because it's a book,
you should read it. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's a bit like when you were younger, if you had like certain collectible toys and leaving them in the packaging, and you'd be like, well, I want to play with it. Like,
I know.
There's so many toys now that it's like, if it's still in packaging, it's worth X amount more, and you're just thinking, well, what kid wanted a toy that they can play with?
Exactly.
I'm always one of the people who will open the box, and there is so many people that know this is the box, and that's the enjoyment they derive from it, and that's more power to you. It's just not what I would.
Exactly.
Not I like doing. Like.
Well, before we leave demo mode, as that's what people are referring this to, with you showing us that book, there's a lot of craziness going on in the chat, because Adam from Comic Bound is here. Chris showed me how to make a Tracy Island out of cereal boxes and empty washing up liquid bottles. He should show you that too while he's in demo mode.
I did. I taught him how to talk to girls as well, but that didn't go so well. It turns out I didn't know much about that, so the Tracy Island worked out better.
Have you got the materials with you now to hand, or
to talk to girls?
No. Yes.
I can do a demonstration on how not to talk to girls, but I won't.
Okay.
Well, I've got a question actually. While we're talking about your collection, what is your favourite comic book that you own?
Hellboy. It's got to be Hellboy, and that's it's for loads of different reasons more than anything. It's kind of the one comic book that I've read and reread and continue to enjoy, no matter how many times I experience it and go through it. It's weird, really, because when I first bought it, I bought like a crappy little trade paperback that fell to bits, and when I first bought it, I can't even remember if I seen the film or not. A bit at that point, but I wasn't expecting much. But the way it was written and the way it was drawn and the world it created, and it bringing in like mythology and religion and theology from real world into this fictional Hellboy universe was just amazing. And then every issue going forward, I was just more and more engrossed and wanting more and more. And that is definitely one that I keep coming back to time and time and time again. And so, that's definitely top of my list.
I've never read the book, but it's certainly a film I absolutely loved. But probably approaching the film in a completely a similar way, like thinking, "What's this?" Like there's just something a little bit different about it. I think, wow, that really sort of piqued my interest, and
it's different now as well, because the film is most people's first experience now. Whereas I genuinely can't remember if I saw it at all before I read the book. But either way, but then going from the film into the comic book is a really different, like there's very little similarity at all. Like Guillermo del Toro created his own Hellboy world, and Mike Mignola created his.
Yeah.
Interesting. One thing I wanted to, again, before we move on last week's show, our show last week, you made a comment, and I think I slightly misinterpreted it, which you said that the source material in the comic books now, or sort of the movies and the content that's being put out, is neglecting the source material, which I think you said in a later comic you was referring more to the actual writers and the creators in this work are being underappreciated, which I sort of missed in my first interpretation of it.
No, that is pretty much it. It's not just underappreciated though; it's underfinanced as well. I think. Take Captain America: Winter Soldier, for example, and Ed Brubaker and Steve Epton, who were the creators behind that story arc. They invented the Winter Soldier. Well, they took Bucky Barnes and made him the Winter Soldier, and they essentially Captain America, the Winter Soldier, that story arc, which has been influencing the MCU from film 2, really.
Yeah.
And they have been quite vocal in how they were treated by Marvel. I mean, they offered them like a bonus when the end of the film came, and Ed Brubaker turned down the bonus, and he was like, why did he turn down the bonus? Because the bonus was literally so minuscule, he was offended by it. So he was just like, you were taking a piss.
Stick it.
You know,
Yeah.
you've got like a £1 billion film and you're giving me this, and I literally created this. Without what I did, this wouldn't happen. And that's not being arrogant in any way, that's being
No,
just
not at all.
realistic. And the other thing was, when they went to the premiere, they turned up for the premieres, like Steve Epton, the artist, and Ed Brubaker, and they weren't even in the main premiere. They were down the road in the friends and family and competition winners premiere, and they were just like, "This is taking."
It's awful, isn't it?
I know, and it happens time and time again, particularly with Marvel, is the source material, the people who create it, because they kind of on a deal that they are work for hire, essentially. They go in, they don't own any of the rights, they paid, and then they leave. Then that company owns everything. But then, even though that company owns everything, there needs to be more gratitude and more respect.
Recognition, such, isn't it?
It does. Because literally, I mean, like, look at people like Jim Starlin. Jim Starlin created that whole Thanos Infinity Stone saga that was peppered throughout all the films and then ended. And I know they interpreted it differently and did something with it, but it would be nothing without him.
Yeah.
I mean, and you don't know his name. You don't, they still working every day to get to get stuff out there. When there's producers and directors that worked on the film directly, they never need to work another day in their lives. And actors, like, you get actors in there that are on like 20 million a film.
Yeah.
And it's just like, but the actor wouldn't even be able to say anything without these creators. And it bugs me majorly, because there's just not enough respect, and there's not enough kind of recognition at all of the people who created, put all their mindset to create that world and that environment. And it's more prominent now than ever, because everything is comic book based. Every Netflix show, every blooming film, everything is comic book based. It's meant that.
And I'm sure from like actual novels that have come out, you think like Harry Potter, I'm sure what's her face, J.K. Rowling isn't short of a few quid after. Not only did the books do really well, but the films, they must have paid for the rights to use her stories. And
exactly.
The same with,
and I'm sure
Lord of the Rings and all them.
But she even got a gig, I might be wrong, but I'm sure she got a gig of like producer or executive producer on some of the films, or some of the recent films, the Fantastic Beasts. And that's a big payday, being a creator and having that. And normally, like, if Ricky Gervais is anything to believe by, when they did The American Office, they'll just put the executive producer on it. You don't even have to do anything. They're just doing that for extra financial incentive. And it's frustrating.
Because it was his baby, wasn't it? The Office. So right, and rightly so. Although they're kind of, I mean, the first series was pretty much a like-for-like copy of the UK version, but the rest of it was completely different and unique in its own way. So, but like you say, he's still earning a bit of money off of that as well, quite a bit of money, I imagine. And a comic book is no different. It's a story, a story, but just in a different format to just words on a page. So. Yeah, I think you're spot on there, Chris, to be honest. I think, and it's something probably I wasn't aware. I don't know about you, Matt, but I wasn't aware that there was that big a gap in the kind of the contrast between.
Not in that sense, but I know from sort of industries I worked in previously that with like the special effects companies, it's a similar sort of thing. They use, rather than Disney has some special effects companies, but largely all of that stuff is outsourced, and you have all these tiny companies that are working at a tiny profit margin, and a lot of them so go bankrupt and so on, and contribute some of the biggest scenes in these films, and they get paid peanuts for it because it's all sort of outsourced, while Marvel or Disney earn the billions. They're barely able to support their staff, but have to You know, if a company's like Disney's coming to you and saying, "Do you want to do this scene for us?" Of course you're going to, because you know, in theory, it will put you in better stead for the future, but it's still financially often prohibitive, which is sad state of affairs, really, isn't it? Is it?
Well, Phil's just thrown in a comment as well, and he said that's why creators keep some of their best ideas for indie books. Yeah, probably.
That's so true. I mean, look at Something Is Killing the Children. You got James Tynion, who wrote that. He had that idea when he was working for years in DC. He had the editors, he was writing Batman. He could have, at any point in DC, he could have gone, "Oh, I got this idea, Something's Killing the Children. Do you want to publish it?" And they would have gone, "Yes." But he didn't, because he knew that it would be more financially beneficial for him and his family and the people around him if he took it to an indie title. Just kept writing the Batman to establish a name and then write his own thing. And that's such a trend in comics at the moment, is that very, very exceptionally talented artists and writers are taking on the Supermans, the Wonder Woman, the Batman to get a name and then take their best ideas to indie comics. And that's great, but it still doesn't push them over the edge, because people are so used to familiar things, and familiar things sell like what? I mean,
you don't even need to promote it, do you?
I know, it's ridiculous. Like, I'm always looking for something new or new interpretation of something, but a lot of people, there's a safeness and a bankability of just going with what they know. I mean, I do like seated talks and things like that on history subjects, and I'll just pick a random history subject and no one will turn up. But then I mention the word crime or something like that, and it's bloody inundated. You know, there's people everywhere because it's a familiar subject. As simple as that. Like,
it's funny, isn't it?
Well, just quickly before we move on to our next topic, Phil has actually got a question for you as well, Chris. He wants to know, do you see an endpoint in collecting? Like, will he just keep going? Will he stop and be fulfilled with what he has? What's his end game?
I've often thought about that myself. It's interesting. I haven't got an answer for that. I genuinely haven't, because I think I'm still in the mode of, when I run out of space, I'll sell it. I'm certain. So I don't think I'll have a stable collection apart from a few. But I think I'll always keep buying, but selling. Like, just before Christmas, I sold a couple of boxes, loads off, and then I had a few spaces to fill, and then just fill them. So, yeah, I think the collection will change, but I'll keep collecting.
Are you always looking for new stuff, or is it a bit like music, where you discover older stuff and think, "Wow, this is actually really good"?
Yeah, no, it's the same thing again, in a weird way, and not to be, arsey about it, but the old stuff is new stuff. You know what I mean? In terms of, like, if I like discover a series from like 1986 that I'd never read before, then I'll jump on and read it. Exactly. And it's one of those things that I'm constantly looking for newer things, and I do get bored of the same character. That's why I haven't, and I've talked about it before, like, a lot of people like adore, one character and just fill their shelves up with one character, and I just can't seem to do it apart from one or two characters like Hellboy or Usagi or Jimbo. And again, there haven't even that much of them compared to what other people got. Of like Spider-Man or X-Men or stuff like that. I do get bored. I need new characters, need different places, need different settings, different themes. And so I forgot what the question was now. Sorry.
You answered it. It's fine.
Yeah, you did answer it. It's fine. Well, we will move on. And we're going to kick off this week's show with a little bit of this.
Question mark. Hello, gentlemen. Thank you for having me on. Happy New Year to you all. My question is about, are you looking forward to anything comic book wise coming in the new year? I've been subscribing to the Kang Marvel books, and I'm looking forward to the conclusion of that this year. Thank you. Cheers.
You can't not answer that.
No, it's. I mean, if Ryan's still even here, I mean, I hope he is. He's, we should make a song out of that, Matt. Just an extended version of the question mark intro.
We should
But
add some verses. Yeah.
yeah. Ryan, if you're listening, mate, get writing. So yeah, I mean, I guess this one, I've got one option. I know we've spoke about it before we came on the show. Let's kick off with you, Chris, because you're the man who
You're the expert.
you're the expert on
in
this.
Yeah. You're from the world of comic books. As
Yeah.
we said
Yeah, I
earlier.
know. We established this. It didn't sound quite right, did it? I'm from the world of comic books. Yeah, but no, there's comic book wise, like I said earlier, collected editions I mainly collect, and there's one that has been delayed, and it's called Parker: The Last Call. And essentially, Parker is a series that was written. It's kind of your hard-boiled crime, fiction, really, and it was written by a pseudonym, Richard Stark, and then it was adapted by Darwin Cook, who is an astoundingly good artist. Weirdly, actually, I did it without thinking. The book I got to show you is Darwin Cook art, but it's not.
How about that?
It's not the
Yeah.
Parker Martini edition, but there's a big old book called Parker, the Martini edition, and then there's the second volume now, which is further stories that have been adapted. And Darwin Cook died a couple of years ago now, died quite young. And it's just a wonderful, oversized book, all about kind of this very 60s crime thrillers and stories. And they're just so well put together, so inventive and creative that I can't wait to just kind of delve more into that world. And this edition now has been delayed since, I think, the start of the end of 2019. It was supposed to come out in, I think, October 2019. And it's just been delayed and delayed and delayed for some reason. They never tell you why. But it's supposedly coming out this year. And that's the one I'm looking forward to most out of anything, book-wise.
Nice. What about you, Matt?
Well, mine's a bit of a cheat because I am no expert on comic books. However, having read Hip Hop Family Tree and then did what I often do with these sort of things, I'll discover something and go digging through Google and have to learn all about it. And discovered that Ed Piscor did a book about hacking or about a hacker. He's going to get it now. He's got it.
For the listeners, Chris is now going to find that one. There you go.
Is that book, WYSIWYG, exactly.
Amazing.
So,
WYSIWYG.
Yeah. Which, look at the book for stars. It is absolutely stunning, isn't it? And again, sort of reading that first, I loved the guy because he did the hip hop, family tree and all of the stuff we've talked about earlier. And then to hear that, oh my God, he also really has an interest in hacking and that sort of culture and stuff. And he did a book about it. And it could not be more me. I can't wait to get hold of it. I haven't bought it yet. So it's something I'm looking forward to this year in terms of the fact I'm going to buy it.
I mean, can I just point out here to all the listeners and viewers and to Chris as well, because you'll probably be a victim. Matt also, at some point in 2021, Matt said to me one day, I've been looking up how to hack. And we're all, I mean, even me, I didn't notice there was a large sum of money that went missing.
He's actually hacked you talking now.
No.
He's doing it now. Yeah.
Programmed by him.
That's it.
You are hacked.
You can see his bank account going.
Yeah.
That's why his eyes are bluer.
Exactly. It's all computerized. But it was you were learning how it's done more so than how to do it.
I love I've got a real thing for sort of
crime.
The early stages in the internet and cyberpunk sort of culture and like the 90s sort of side of it, but also hacking generally. I've always had an interest in technology, and I love and like a comment Shane said, "Dear Google, how does one hack a computer?" There is a site called Google Hacks, and it will tell you very clearly how to find very private information just by using Google searches. That's the thing. Don't do it from your normal browser though. Protect yourself. Use VPN, etc., etc. But I find it very interesting learning how to do it. I'm not hacking anyone. I'm just learning how to. Is the thing. So reading a comic book about it, awesome.
Well, this one is basically he's combined loads of different hacker stories into one guy, and so essentially it's a fictional story, but lots and lots of real stories intertwined in that. The only thing I will say about it, when you're reading it, is that it was originally a web comic, which was done in 1 or 2 pages. So when you read it as a full, now and again it jars a little bit, just because it was never meant to be one constant narrative. But it's still very good, and the artwork in it is exceptional, I think.
Just a quick question, Chris. Do you just read? Is your interest solely in comics, or do you read novels and?
Yeah, no, I like novels. Like I tend to like crime novels, like James Ellroy and things like that. I don't tend to read like fantasy novels or anything like that, because that's one of the things that I think comics attracted to me more than anything. I hate descriptive writing. I can't stand it. It draws me away from the book, and that's why I think crime stories are quite direct. Now and again they'll describe a scene or something, but it's very character driven, very dialogue driven. But like fantasy books like Lord of the Rings, for example, takes like about 900 pages describing a tree. Do you know what I mean? Or describing a mountain. I just can't get it. And
some might argue the film is the same as well. I mean, I love the film, but it's 9 hours just for the standard version for the trilogy.
Yeah, but comics kind of took that out of the equation, because the visuals do all the scene. So you don't need to read anything about the scene, because it's there in front of you.
See it. Yeah.
And I gelled with that medium more than anything, because I found it easier to read. And then I also love art. And so when you're reading it, you're getting like a little piece of art in every panel, and it's just lovely. But I do... Yeah, Raymond Chandler and James Ellroy and things like that, kind of, crime.
Have you ever bought a comic that you haven't actually read?
Yeah, loads.
No,
oh no, initially no. Actually, well, I've always bought one that I've read a preview, a first issue, like a chunk of the beginning, because that's one of the things I always do, really. But there's one comic that I bought, a big comic that I bought actually, that I never really read anything, and I just did it because I wanted to jump into that world, and I loved the presentation of it, and that was the Akira box set. Now, I hadn't seen the film and I hadn't read the book, but the presentation and the style of the drawing, I was just like, I want that, and I bought it, and I've read it like so many times. But more often than not, I will read a preview, so I've read a percentage of every book that I've got, really, I would say.
Okay. I was going to ask you about the Akira one, actually, because I noticed in your artwork, which I think is absolutely amazing, the detail on it, and you've got Akira sort of on the shelf in your logo. I'm a huge fan in the film, but I've never read the manga. Is it comparable?
It is.
Now?
Because manga is so visual and so action paced, it's quite astounding, I think, how when you read Japanese comics and when you read Western comics, you realize how good the Japanese are in creating movement and pace and action. And they are, honestly, there are no better action-based comics in the world than Japanese comics, without a shadow of a doubt. And Akira is one of those just ingenious ones that mix like science fiction and apocalyptic futures and superhumans with just amazing action and big epic action scenes. I mean, Kachichu Otomo, who writes and draws it, like literally dedicates like 2 or 3 pages full of just like explosions and artworks, and they just so beautiful. But I think the comic book is far better than the film, because the film tries to condense too much of what the overall story was into a
it's about a
short
6-part series, isn't it? It's quite
6 volumes. And I think it creates a lot more jeopardy with the main character as well. And the main character you end up loving the main character a lot more in the books than you do in the film, because the film, when you finish the film, he's still that kind of unlovable rogue.
Yeah.
And in the first volume or two, he is definitely that unlovable, but then he just grows on you, and you really love the character by the end. And so I think the characters have time to really grow on you. Definitely.
I like this. Shane has just said manga's killing it right now. Top of all the selling lists, outselling DC and Marvel by a country mile. Very
Honestly, you wouldn't believe. You know, like back in the early 2000s when all of us guys were like listening to like indie and Britpop still hanging over and stuff
Still
like that.
am.
And everybody was like into new metal, and you were like, who's this band? Who's this band? And then like about 900 people turn up and they know all about it and they're super into it because it was this gigantic counter subculture. And in Britain, I think we're the same. We don't understand how gigantic the manga industry is. The comic industry is nothing compared to it. It's honestly, it's a fraction. The amount and diversity of people that's into Japanese comics is mental.
Yeah.
I mean, you go into a bookshop like Waterstones, and the comic collection is going down and down and down, and the manga collection is going up and up and up every year. And there's a reason for that. It's because it's selling. And honestly, it's
but there's
crazy.
so many TV shows as well now that, you know, on Netflix and Amazon and whatever that people are watching as well, which
that's
I think
what I was
is
going to say.
exposing it more.
I remember, like me growing up, sort of. I remember it being a thing that you were sort of aware of, but it wasn't that accessible. Whereas I think now, you know, my oldest is 13. All of his friends are into anime. Like, all of his friends have, you know, got a Crunchyroll subscription. They're watching Demon Slayer. And they're watching all of these things, and it's the norm. It's you know, it's not the weird kid over there who's really into his manga and his anime. It's just normal. They're watching it like they watch The Simpsons or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's incredible. There's this whole generation as well that's coming up with just that it's there, and that's you know how it is, which is amazing. Absolutely amazing.
It is. They just weren't translating it. They weren't translating it back when we were younger. There was loads of translations, but the animes were more frequently, because there's this weird tendency that people, British publishers and American publishers, like, oh, that won't sell. Black and white comics won't sell. That type of comics won't sell. Reading from right to left won't sell.
Yeah.
And so we've almost been kind of held back by the people in control of the publishing companies, because they've made assumptions on what we will and will not consume. And they couldn't have been more wrong about manga. They couldn't have been.
Yeah, and we're seeing
What's
that
yours,
now.
James?
Mine, again, probably a bit of a cheap one, really, because you know I'm not a collector. I'm not going to lie and say I am, but the ones that I do collect are because they're through friends of ours or whatever that are actually making them and creating them. So I don't know if you're aware, Chris, but a good friend of mine growing up, who I've known for all my life, he's brought out a comic book that he's been writing for probably near 12 years. And he brought it out last year. Or was it the year before last, Matt? When did Adam come
Probably
on?
year before last.
Year before. So he created it. He done all the writing, and then he got in touch with an artist, a local artist in Essex, who done all the artwork. We've had him on the show as well, Ben. But that's the Secret Protectors, which is, so they're now doing their Kickstarter for issue 4 and 5, I think. So Secret Protectors, which definitely worth checking out. And it's, it is that thing of being proud of something that even if it wasn't me that made it, I'm proud because it's one of my oldest friends who's done this, and it's been a dream of his. I think when he came on our show, Matt, he was talking about having this idea nearly 10 years and thinking it will never happen. And now, again, with lockdown and everything like that, I think it made people step up and go, I'm going to do that now. And I think, to actually, as he said to us, and we've had it when we've had the Sega Mania guys on with their magazine that they made, Andy Robertson, who came on about his gaming book, to hold something physical that you've actually put all your effort into creating, or most of it, must be such a feeling. And it's the same for us with your show, your channel. And the same for us with ours. To think that it's there, it's going to be there forever until YouTube blows up. In which case, you can listen to it on Anchor. But yeah,
So-
that'd be more of them.
Something that's popped up in the comments, which
Mhm.
is Cowboy Bebop, and this is something that I've not spoken about this season, and I meant to be because I absolutely adore it. I never watched. I saw bits of Cowboy Bebop because there used to be. There's been this weird Freeview channel that showed anime till really late at night, and I used to watch on occasionally. But over sort of the last couple of months, I've started watching Cowboy Bebop, and I am absolutely in love with it. It is just beautiful. Like it's just so chilled, and I just sitting and watching. I'm just like absorbed into this world. And the original sort of anime I'm referring to, rather than the Netflix reboot as such. But yeah,
Have you seen any of that,
fantastic.
Chris?
None.
No,
You should
me
watch
neither.
it.
I've seen it on there.
It's two
Well,
guys
Netflix.
two guys that are bounty hunters, and it's sort of set in space. It's like in a sort of a futuristic sort of space world. They're on Mars, and each episode pretty much they get a new bounty, and they have to pursue this particular person. Only like 30 minutes a piece, the episodes. And they meet these different characters, and then they sort of come along for the journey and things like that. But it's just, yeah, and there's just this charm about it. It's not really hectic. It's got a bit of action in it, but it's just, I don't know. It's just got a vibe for want of a
But this is the
better
original
term.
one you're talking about, not the Netflix
Yeah,
one.
no,
that I've
the
seen.
original one, which they only made one series of. It was in I think it's about 98, something like that. So it's good. Again, it's quite an old thing now. But yeah, absolute bliss. And as Perfect Edition Comics has said, Cowboy Bebop soundtrack is god level, and it is. It's like this mad jazz sort of soundtrack. It's got to phenomenal in every way. Yeah, watch it definitely.
Well,
You're not allowed to highlight any comments from Perfect Edition because he's not a very nice guy. He's a horrible guy.
It's fine. We'll edit that out of the audio version and go on any streaming sites.
Well, and just like the perfect link always, Matt, seems to happen on our show. You mentioned bounty hunters. That takes me on to my story of this week that caught my, well, I'm sure a lot of people's eyes. Mandalorian featuring Boba Fett, which is the latest series in the Star Wars saga, aka the Book of Boba Fett. First episode. Did both of you watch it?
Yes.
No.
Good start.
Good stuff. I watched it.
What did you think, James? I'm interested to have your verdict.
Do you know what? Because I'm probably a bit like Chris. Like I'll watch it, but I'm not knowledgeable to a lot of the stuff, and a lot of it kind of, I really enjoyed The Mandalorian, both seasons of that, and it felt like obviously how that one ended with Boba Fett being in that second series. Or didn't he appear at the end of the first, or was it just?
No, he was only in the second season of Mandalorian.
So, and now it's kind of fed on from there, and you're getting a bit of backstory about where he was when he obviously went missing, I assume. I just, that's where I'm lost a little bit. I'm like, what?
It was very much fan service, that first episode. And if you aren't familiar with Star Wars, it would have probably gone completely over your head. So when Boba Fett is very briefly in the original trilogy of films, and in Return of the Jedi, he gets thrown into the Sarlacc, which is it's like a big mouth in the floor in the desert, basically. And you see him go in, and that's it as such. So in the Book of Boba Fett, it shows you him in the Sarlacc, basically, and that's where he is. He's in it, and he sort of fights his way out and sort of drags his way across the desert. In Tatooine. So for me, as a Star Wars fan, I'm watching it and thinking, "Oh my god, he's in the Sarlacc! That's incredible!" Like you're seeing what's happening to him, because he's always been assumed that he got out, but never sort of confirmed as such. So I really enjoyed that, and then seeing him taken by the sort of sand people and those sort of things, I thought it was a nice touch. As such, seeing a bit of that backstory. However, I do think it was, I know, it's a bit sort of style over substance. Like that's all it was. Like that first episode, it didn't really give you much else apart from, oh look, fans, look, we're showing you this. This is really cool, isn't it?
They were dreams as well, weren't they?
Well, I think it was his memories of what has happened in the past, isn't it? Because he was thinking about when Django got killed as well, which is in the, I can't remember what film.
Attack of the Clones.
Yeah, I think it is, isn't it? In that big battle with the cat and the stuff.
With the cat.
Well, it's like a big tiger thing.
Yeah, well, it's just funny when you say it like that.
Cat.
You said style over substance, but isn't it Robert Rodriguez? Ooh.
Well, that's the thing. And at the end of it, you see written by Jon Favreau, directed by Robert Rodriguez. What? That's amazing.
And he is the king of style over substance. He really is.
He is. Yeah.
He seems to not give a crap about dialogue. Where he just likes the look.
Yeah,
it's true. Loves it.
But I love him as a director. I think he's great because he's taken, well, sort of this episode aside, he's taken so many risks in cinema, and he's pretty much did what he wanted to do. You know, in a lot of things. Spy Kids, awesome trilogy. Love Spy Kids. You can't knock that in any way. Yeah. So,
Jon Favreau as well, by the way. God, how talented is he with what he gets involved in? He's got his fingers in God knows how many pies.
Yeah.
I've been watching so many films over Christmas with my kids and New Year. There was one the other day that I saw and it said like Jon Favreau was involved in. I can't remember where, but
The Lion King, isn't it?
Even from an acting,
or the Jungle Book.
Yeah, it was the Jungle Book. That's what I watched. Yeah, Jungle Book. We watched the original Little Mermaid. He wasn't in that. But yeah, there's literally so many things that he's involved in. I always just used to think of him as an actor, but it feels like now, although he's
as
still
Phil said, Elf. That was Jon Favreau.
Yeah.
But
and he did the follow up to Jumanji. With people loved that. What was it called?
The rock version.
No, it was like the space version of Jumanji. What was it now?
Space version of Jumanji.
Yeah, you never watched that. Yeah, they did
off the back of the Robin Williams one.
Old Jumanji we're talking about.
Yeah, right. Jumanji, but it was seen and touted and kind of billed as an offshoot of Jumanji because it was a board game, but it was set in space. I can't remember the name, you know.
This sounds insanity. I've got...
Yeah. No, I see Jon Favreau and I worry about Jon Favreau more than anything because from Swingers up until now and Iron Man and everything, I love Jon Favreau. That's it. Shane's got it. Zatara or Zatara.
Yeah.
But yeah, and he's put on so much weight now that I see him and I'm just like, oh, come on, John. Lose a bit. I want a few more years of you. You guys, and yeah, he does.
You're right as well because there was another film that I watched the other day that had him in it, and he was the brother of it was a crappy Christmas film, and all the family go around, and he's this like jock brother, and he looks really like quite fit in it and quite well put together. And now you see him now, obviously, he's putting it on a little bit.
I know. I worry about him, though, because I really genuinely like Jon Favreau.
Yeah.
I really do.
I
genuinely do.
Give him a call, I think.
I think I should. Give him like a Clay from Big Brother fitness video or something like that.
But Matt, sorry, just to finish on this one, are you excited about the next episode?
Oh, yeah, because it's Boba Fett and I love him.
He's your favourite.
That's my final words. Yeah, he's one that again we spoke a bit before we went live about Star Wars, and I think it's so intertwined with my sort of childhood and the whole aesthetic of it, and particularly that character. I always absolutely loved it. So yeah, I'll stick it out. I'll watch it. It's fine.
It does my head in or stuff like this because The Mandalorian was. enjoyable. It was great. It was fun. It was cool.
Fantastic.
It was like
Yeah.
a sci-fi western, got that all aesthetic and
Yeah.
vibe to it. Great. What I didn't like about it is when it started bringing in those characters like Boba Fett and
Yeah.
like Luke Skywalker,
Yeah.
and I'm like, you don't need
You don't
to
need
do it.
to.
It
No.
was good without all that,
Yeah.
all that harking back. And again, Boba Fett is one of those things. It's like the Solo movie. I don't want to know the origin of Han Solo. Part of the reason why he's such an amazing character is he's mysterious, and you're trying to take away that mystery. It's like,
I
it's like
know exactly what you
giving
mean.
the Joker an origin. Do you know?
Yeah.
I don't care.
No, he's
that character is
cool
fine.
now. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's it. I think the actor and the character of the Mandalorian was such a strong character. You know, just the way it was acted, the way his relationship with everyone else that was in it and whatever, I just thought so well executed, wasn't it? I guess, you know, but Boba Fett has got it's weird because as a character in the films, he's relatively minimal. You know, he doesn't talk really or anything like that. So they can take it in pretty much whatever direction they want, but they've still got a very high benchmark because there's so much expectation to it. So I don't know, maybe doomed to fail. But
can I just say the chat has been brilliant tonight, and I'm sorry we haven't shown every comment that's coming through, but this one from Shane made me laugh. He's Boba Fett, and I love him.
Exactly.
Matt 2022
on the film poster, and that's what it would say. He's Boba Fett, and I love him. This Week in Metropolis. And that's fine.
And Phil's one, to be fair, Luke Skywalker's appearance made grown men cry. Did it make you cry, Matt?
I didn't cry in that. I have been known to cry in certain Star Wars films, though, and I'm not ashamed to admit that. So, yeah.
Okay.
Empire Strikes Back.
No, it was actually one of the new ones when, spoilers, Han Solo gets killed.
Oh, bless him.
Oof, God.
Here's a quick question for you, Chris. Any film that's you can just name one. You haven't got to list them all. If there's multiple, any that have made you cry?
There's loads that have made me cry.
What one springs to mind instantly?
For some weird reason, then Room for Romeo Brass sprung to mind. Have you ever seen that? It's a Paddy Constantine film with what's his name now? Shane Meadows, is it? The guy doing This Is England and stuff like that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know what you mean.
He did an early film called Room for Romeo Brass, and when you said that, that popped into my mind because it reminds me so much of growing up in my community. You know, where there's these people that are kind of bullying you and these intimidating characters, and I cried with joy when the kids kind of overcame the things in their life really at the end, because it focuses on these two kids, and that's a great film. Anything by Shane.
I love something that's got that's relatable. That you can, even if it hasn't happened to you necessarily, but you go, God, I was even saying this about Ron's Gone Wrong. I don't know if you've seen that with the kids, because I
watched it. Yeah.
Watching that, and I'm thinking, I feel so sorry for Barney, and I just want him to have, something, that. I
was closer to crying with the Mitchells film, though, when the father and the daughter got together and they were singing that at the end. That'll make no sense to no one who's watched it, but
no, it's brilliant. Well, me and Matt absolutely love that film, don't we, Matt?
What's that?
Ron's Gone Wrong. Machines.
Oh, Mitchell's vs. Machines, fantastic. I haven't watched Ron's Gone Wrong yet. I'm trying to convince my children to. I did watch Encanto at the weekend, though. That was good.
Yeah, really good.
Decent film.
Well, before we finish the show with Chris's news story of the last week, I mean, if it is the last week, because we'll save the best till last, Chris.
It's not the best. It's not the best.
We'll be the judge of that. Matt's going to talk about a new game, and if anyone follows Matt on Instagram, then you'll see the game that you would have seen the game that he's talking about.
Yeah, we talked about Andy Robertson that James mentioned. He does a lot of stuff for kids, like in terms of gaming, like positive gaming experiences for children. And he talked about there's a game for everyone. Like a lot of people look at gaming and they think, oh, it's not for me. Like if you're not you associate with, there's Call of Duty and that's it pretty much. But my experience, I love gaming, but in recent years, I a bit like you were saying about comic books and that, I've leaned more towards like the more indie titles, because they're a little bit more imaginative. Like they put a little bit more risk and so on in it. And there was a game that I read. There was a sort of a review of 2021 games you might have missed or whatever, and this game called Lake was on there. So I thought, well, I'll have a look at the trailer and that. And on paper, you might think, God, this sounds awful, but it's about a 40-something lady who's in like this high flying career, who comes back to her hometown. It's this little town around the lake in Oregon. So lots of woodland and stuff like that. And he's covering as a mailman for her father. So she's sort of back to an environment she's not been within for 20 years. She's, moving away from something that's sort of stressing her out and just bringing her into this sort of familiar environment. But because she's been away from it for so long, it's completely unfamiliar. And yeah, so I started playing it a couple of nights ago, and I'm just hooked, absolutely hooked. And it's the first experience I think I've had with a game which it's relatable. It's the weird thing. And being someone who's in their 40s, and like, everyone, I think, most people of a certain age can think of, well, I'm in a job and I'm not particularly enjoying it at the moment, or I remember when I was younger or whatever, and remembering people you knew and whatever. And it just ticks all those boxes. You sort of, you're driving around and you're delivering the post to these different places, and you meet people, and like they'll start talking and say, "Oh, I remember you," or like there's something, she meets a friend who she had 20 years ago and hasn't stayed in contact with her, and there's that awkward exchange of, "Oh yeah, these things have happened in my life, but you've missed out on them, and I tried to contact you, but you weren't there." And you select the different responses, so there's a certain amount of influence you have on the direction in the game and how much you decide to help people in that. But I just thought it was interesting from so many in the games that certainly the boys play, where it's just action and it's triggering the neurons in terms of, oh God, let's all get excited, to this thing that was almost like watching a movie, but also things that I was looking at and thinking, yeah, I can relate to some of the things, or like looking back at life experience and thinking, yeah, that's that's tough when that happens or whatever. So yeah, awesome.
Absolutely. Are you a gamer, Chris?
Yeah, I love gaming. I'm a big Nintendo guy, to be honest. So I play a lot of anything like the Switch now, which has kind of rapidly become the only console I play. To be honest, PS5 and Xbox and everything like that, it's a bit too serious. Every game is like intense first-person shooter that's really good. And Nintendo kind of, I don't know, I think Nintendo is a great console, and their own based games always seem to have elements of so many different genres. And so you never kind of get bored in one direction, because the games are so full of variety. I love how he was talking about this new cutting edge game, and the game I put down before I came on here was Final Fantasy VII. I'm replaying that on my Switch, and I'm like, I feel like I'm kind of going through the nostalgia kick with that, but I haven't played it since like back when it came out. So,
but isn't that an example, though, that there are certain, and we've talked about this loads on the podcast, in that there are certain games now that should and are sort of being looked at in the way that like a classic movie is, or something like that. When it came out, it was just another game, but now it's sort of stood the test of time, and it's gaming is where it is now, and you can revisit these things, and I think that's a really nice thing. They're getting the respect they deserve in certain areas. Yeah.
I find games like Final Fantasy and like Monkey Island and Broken Sword and all these kind of adventure games straight in a strange place nowadays, because they seem to be more available on mobile than on consoles.
Yeah.
And it's very strange to play such an immersive game on a mobile app. It's a weird thing to do. Like, have you played Monkey Island before? Have you both?
No, I never have.
Monkey Island is.
I really need to. That's on my list of things I want to revisit.
Well, it's just a great humorous point and click adventure game. But to play it on a mobile just seems it was weird when you come from playing it on a TV, on a console, going through it. But it seems like there's lots of rights issues for various games, particularly LucasArts games.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is, but there's loads of really good point-and-click games, and I love those. Like Broken Sword is one of my favorites. I love JRPG games and so Dragon Quest and all them. I love Dragon Quests.
Yeah.
And they're actually remaking the third Dragon Quest in this kind of 2D HD mode at the moment, which is coming out later next year, I think. Later this year or early next year. And that looks amazing. So good.
Yeah, I've never played a Final Fantasy game or any JRPGs really. They've just never appealed, and I don't know whether it's just my preconception of what it's going to be like or what. But
is it that they've never appealed now, Matt, or
ever
or in the past?
Yeah, just ever. There's a blanket thing.
Even now, you're not thinking you're a bit older. It might be something that might be of interest, or
no, just never had the appeal. Some reason
it's a rabbit hole. The kind of when you go down, you will go down hard. I think because JRPGs are stylistically they're all over the top, melodramatic games, and the soundtracks on them are phenomenal across the like the soundtrack for Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy and all them are so good. And I think the only element that kind of can put off a lot of people is the kind of grinding nature of the battle systems and things like that, because most of them have a leveling up nature to them. But again, if the ones you love, you wanna level up and you wanna do and you kind of like appreciate that leveling up, like Pokemon, for example. I'll play Pokemon endlessly, and that's the key example.
I'm Mr. Pokemon Go is what I spend a fair chunk. Well, not a fair chunk, but on a daily basis, I invest my time into Pokemon Go.
I would say if you
don't
like
mind the
Pokemon
grind
Go,
of that. Yeah.
If you like Pokemon Go, then you're gonna like a JRPG because that is basically a stripped down JRPG. They've stripped it down to be super mobile, and they've taken a lot of elements out of it. But essentially, leveling up, a bit of narrative, a bit of good music, and that's what it's kind of all about, really.
Yeah.
Nice. Well,
the
Matt,
time has come.
Just quickly, do you think you'll complete that game?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's nice because it's in daily segments, so I can which take about 20-30 minutes a piece. So depending on sort of what you're doing, so it works well for someone who can't sit down and spend hours all the time doing it. I can do a day and then think, I'll come back to that. So definitely will.
Nice. Well, drum roll please, because we are coming to our first guess news story of the week.
Yes,
Chris, hit us with it.
I will prefix this with you just told me to pick a news story, and I didn't think there'd be this amount of building up and pressure on it. But the only news story that took place that I was even mildly interested in was the devastation of starfish. Have you heard this?
No. Tell us.
On the coast of Wales, there's literally tens and tens of thousands of starfish that are all covering the beaches, and they're all just dead. Like literally, you can't see the sand in some places. They're just devastation across everywhere.
Wow.
And I was looking at it, I was thinking, what the hell is going on here, basically? But I can't. When I was doing this, and I was thinking, is this too sad a story to bring up? And it is in a way.
It is.
It's a bit of a bummer to end on. I know that, but ultimately, what happened is the climate change and the temperature and stormy wind tides have just literally, basically, climate change had killed a lot of them off because they were coming in to reproduce because the temperature was off, and then the storm took them and basically brought them in, and now literally the beaches of Pembrokeshire and everywhere like that are just covered, and you can see pictures online if you Google this after you go here. You can see literally, and I'm not kidding you, tens of thousands of dead starfish just littering the shores of Wales.
Wow.
joyous
Was there any
end.
sort of big operation to try and put them back in the sea, or
No, they're all dead. They're all dead. And there's so
It's
many
too
of
late.
them, they literally wouldn't even begin to be able to put them back. They just got to wait. I'll quote a scientist. The scientist being interviewed said that it's too big a job for us. We're going to have to wait for the gulls and the weather to do the job for us. And it's like, Jesus, that's depressing.
Is there anything we can do? Like, because let's look at this in a pragmatic way. Fair enough. They're gone. They're all there on the beach. Can we repurpose them as anything? Is the question.
Ornaments.
Yeah.
door stops?
Do you remember, did any of you have a nan who you go into their house and they got this weird, like,
It's like a
conch
shell
or shell?
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't see them anymore.
No,
But-
you don't.
Or made into like a frog band made out of shells, like some weird sort of thing. Yeah. Well,
Do you know the most fascinating thing about starfish, though? Starfish are regenerative in such an amazing way that you can literally take all the arms and legs off and it'll grow back. And
Amazing.
not only that, if you basically take one bit and took it totally away from the other, if certain organs and certain parts survive, it will regrow and there'll be two of them in separate places. Yeah.
There you go. A happy ending.
That is the solution then. What we need to do is get the
They
remaining...
need to be alive.
We need to get the remaining starfish, chop them up, and then we'll have multiple of the remaining ones.
Yeah, I was going to say, this isn't like a blessing where we needed a culling of starfish.
No.
So it's not like, oh, actually, it's done us a favour.
Not really, no. There wasn't. I can't remember a time where people were out protesting to cull starfish. I don't think that's a thing. It's not like the farmers, like, culling badgers or anything like that. This was an unexpected thing. Wales is devastated. I'm sure Scott will back me up. The Wales is mourning today.
Yeah. Well, as we've Ryan has actually said a good option for them. Candle holders.
Yeah.
I guess if you but yeah, Phil,
I think we should.
Phil don't want to believe it.
No. But Shane, Dawn of Comics.
Yeah.
Sea sponges. Interesting fact there. You're talking about regenerative. You can blend a sea sponge and it will come back.
Worse than that, you can take two separate from totally separate parts of the world, put them in a blender, blend them down, tip it out, and they will separate themselves back into their original form.
Nice.
How mad is that? We think we're the special ones. We know nothing.
Yeah. They're the masters. I mean, interestingly, I've got a point about this just quickly before we sign off. Scott, he lives in Wales, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, he's Welsh. Didn't have a clue this happened. Sorry. Interesting.
Don't leave. No one leaves.
What's interesting about this is it makes me think of, I watched the other night, Don't Look Up. Have you seen that, Chris?
I have.
And if it's not getting on the news, it's because we're too busy reading about celebrities who have recently split up or got back together. It's because they're telling us what we need and want or don't want to hear. But
clearly Scott has been reading too much Heat magazine and not been checking out the beaches.
It's not even Scott's fault. It's the fact of what news we weren't aware of it, but then we live the other side of the country.
Yeah, there's none on the Norfolk coast.
But the point being, if you're not made aware of it,
there's lots of jellyfish in Norfolk, isn't there? I remember one last time I went to the beach covered in jellyfish.
Yeah, but no one cares about jellyfish. Starfish are cute in some way.
They're hideous.
Jellyfish are disgusting.
So bags.
Kill them all.
And on that note, before we do leave, it's been a fantastic show. Thank you so much again, Chris, for joining us. Where can our viewers, we're going to plug it away anyway, but where can our viewers and listeners find your show?
You can find it at Off My Shelves on YouTube. Hopefully it'll come up when you search it. Sometimes it doesn't because I'm not that well known. apparently. It's how weird sometimes you know a person's address on YouTube and you type it in, it never comes up, and you're like, how is that possible? It's because YouTube is rubbish. But yeah, Off My Shelves on YouTube, and then off_my_shelves on Instagram, and that's the only two places you can find me. I abstain from everything else.
Well, you're not doing too badly. That's what I will say. If you're just staying on them two, and I beg people. I don't need to beg. They should go and check out your channel. It is incredible. You're amazing at what you do. Keep doing it. We'll continue to follow you and to share it with our friends. And fantastic. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the compliments. Very much appreciated.
You're more than welcome. For our listeners and our viewers, thank you for being part. We've had so many people join us tonight. Thank you for everyone who's taken part in the comments. We're sorry we haven't shared them all. But yeah, really appreciate it. We will be back next week, and hopefully joining us next week is the other Welshman, because there's only two. It's going to be Scott from Scott's Shelf. But until then, we will see you soon. Take care.
I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as we did. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you don't miss any of our future episodes.
Yeah, and you can also follow us on all social media. So you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok.